Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this breaking news update. I'm Nikki Wyrick.
And I'm Joe Cole. We are also streaming live on Fox21News.com. Now, Governor John Hickenlooper expected to hold a press conference in just minutes regarding the shooting death of Tom Clements.
The Colorado Department of Corrections director was shot and killed at his home last night. Authorities are still searching for his killer. Questions have been raised as to whether the attack had anything to do with his position. Authorities are also looking for a dark-colored boxy car. It was spotted around 8:30 last night near Clements' house. Now, the vehicle's engine was running, and a witness reported seeing someone driving away in that car.
Now, Lieutenant Jeff Kramer with the El Paso County Sheriff's Department says investigators haven't ruled anything out. The shooting could have been related to Clements' job as the state's top prison official. Now, Governor Hickenlooper emotional earlier this morning when he spoke at a news conference. During that time, he said he doesn't think the killing was part of a larger attack against his cabinet. Now, it would have been simple to find where Clements lived. It took 2 clicks to get his correct street address through a publicly available internet locator service.
Our thoughts and prayers are with his wife, Lisa, and their 2 daughters. Certainly with all the employees of the Department of Corrections who Tom worked so hard with. Tom's family has requested privacy at this time. We sincerely ask the community and the media to respect that request. You can imagine this is the hardest time that anyone could possibly go through. They are grieving as we are all grieving.
Hickenlooper obviously emotional this morning during that news conference. After all, he did appoint Clements to that post. Now, earlier this afternoon, we received an update from the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. They're looking for a person who may have valuable information concerning the vehicle of interest. Authorities believe there was a white woman, 35 to 50 years old, who may have been speed walking last night along Colonial Park Drive. Now, she was wearing light pants, a dark windbreaker, and a hat. I want to remind everyone this woman is not a suspect, but the Sheriff's Office would just like to speak with her to see if she has any further information. That woman is asked to call 719-520-7225.
All right, Lieutenant Jeff Kramer is now speaking live from the Operations Center set up outside where this horrific murder took place. Let's go live to that press conference.
Night and into the early part of today. The first thing I'd like to comment on and really compliment thus far and really encourage everyone by this statement is the level of collaboration that we see going on right now amongst our agency and several others who have provided assistance and continue to provide assistance during the course of this investigation. Earlier today, I had the privilege of attending a meeting in which representatives from many of those collaborators were in attendance to talk about some of the details as we know them thus far in the course of this investigation, and more importantly, take that information and come up with a plan on how to proceed, what those priorities are in the process of that investigation, and move forward from there. And of course, we had representatives from the FBI, from CBI, from the Department of Corrections, from Colorado Springs Police Department, from the District Attorney's Office here in the 4th Judicial District, the Inspector General's Office, the Attorney General's Office as well as the U.S. Marshal's Office. So a number of people, a number of agencies, if you will, have certainly stepped forward and raised their hand and said, hey, we're willing to help. And of course, us as a Sheriff's Office, given the scope of this investigation and the scope of the information that is coming in and probably will continue to for some time, we're certainly very receptive to that help and appreciate those collaborators for the assistance that they provide. So we're off to a very good start in terms of that and the teamwork that's going into investigating this case. I don't have much to offer you in terms of an update on the investigation itself, but there are a couple pieces of the investigation and information we provided earlier that I would like to reiterate, because these are the pieces that we're really looking to the public for right now for some additional information on. As all of you are aware, earlier today we released some information about a vehicle of interest, a vehicle that was seen last night in this area about 15 minutes or so prior to us receiving our first 911 call on this incident. As you folks know, that's being described as something similar to perhaps a late 80s, early 90s model Lincoln, perhaps a Cadillac, something of that nature. It's a boxy styled vehicle, if you will. It's a two-door. It's dark in color. It's either black or some other dark color. It's being described as shiny. We don't have any information on the license plate of that vehicle. Obviously, that's information we'd like to have. One thing that is noteworthy is when we released that information initially, we did receive 3 or 4 additional phone calls from local residents who confirmed also seeing that vehicle, and were able to provide some of the information regarding their sightings as well, again in this same area with a very similar description for that vehicle. So that piece of information continues to be very interesting to us, something that we hope to learn more about. Specifically, what that car was, the registered owner, so to speak, and who would have been occupying and driving that vehicle last night when those observations were made. So we continue to ask the public for help in that regard. A reminder on the phone number that needs to be used would be 719-390-5555. That number is to our non-emergency dispatch line into the Sheriff's Office. That number is staffed 24/7. We provided a more recent update, someone who's not a person of interest in this crime, but rather someone that the Sheriff's Office is eager to speak with. We believe this person might have some additional information, especially regarding that vehicle of interest that I just spoke about. We have information that leads us to believe that there was a white female, perhaps between the age of 35 and 50, who was speed walking or exercising, if you will, along Colonial Park Drive about 8:30 last night. She's been described as wearing light pants, a dark windbreaker, and also a hat. Again, this is not a person of interest concerning the crime, but rather someone we think may have made some observations that could be valuable to us. We're certainly encouraging that person to give us a call at that same number. And that's actually a change for us. When we put out the information earlier about that, we included a 520 number for that person to call. We'd like to change that and make sure that they also use that 390-5555 number because, again, it's staffed 24/7, and we'll be able to more easily log that call and direct it to the right person to take her information. So we're encouraging that as well. I did have some questions earlier today that we weren't able to answer just yet, and that is all of you are aware that the initial reports that came in when the 911 call was placed was indicating that Mr. Clements had answered the door and was shot upon answering the door. I can tell you at this point that the information we've gained through the course of our investigation thus far is consistent with that particular report. We're not speaking to what we believe the exact sequence of events was at that door while he answered. We're not speaking to his injuries in terms of the number of times that he was shot or the location of those wounds at all at this time. I'm sure that all of you can understand that it's important in any investigation for law enforcement to protect certain parts of the investigation, to safeguard that as we move forward in this case, just like with any other. I also want to let everyone know that I will take a few questions. Following those questions, what I'd like to do is simply offer some insight to all of the media partners here as far as how we will disseminate information going forward from this point. So at this point, I will go ahead and take a few questions, and I'll ask that folks stick around and allow me to provide that information as far as how we'll keep you folks informed as we move forward. Yes, ma'am.
Where was the car when it was first seen? When it was running but unoccupied?
The question was, where was the vehicle when it was first seen, when it was running and unoccupied? We're speaking about the vehicle of interest. That was seen at the intersection of Colonial Park Drive and Scarsbrook Court. Scarsbrook Court is just beyond, as we go down the hill behind me, and we pass by the Clements residence. It's the next intersection on the right. It's just a couple hundred yards from that residence.
So
yes, sir.
Where else was the vehicle, when you got those 3 or 4 other calls, where else was the vehicle reported?
It was, thank you, sir. It was in this general area, again, around this area, very nearby to the Clements home where those other observations were made as well.
Was it moving?
I don't believe it was at that point. Obviously, some of those reports are varying as they come in, and we continue to conduct some of those interviews. Yes, ma'am.
What access have you had to surveillance, and where are you taking surveillance footage from any place? And what is the surveillance like in this neighborhood and in the surrounding area?
Well, I can speak more to the possible surveillance that's in the surrounding area rather than anything here close by. As you can tell, it's a relatively rural but wooded environment. But certainly we have an interest in those stores, those shopping center locations, if you will, that are somewhat nearby, down near the intersection of Jackson Creek and Baptist Road, those areas. So that's something that we're certainly aware of and mindful of as we follow up on leads in this case. Yes, sir.
There have been reports that you may be looking into a connection with the refusal to release the Saudi convicted rapist. What can you tell us about that? Is it part of the investigation?
I can tell you that we're aware of that information. As you know, from the start of this investigation when it began last night, because of the fact that Mr. Clements served in the position that he did as the executive director of Colorado Department of Corrections, we're sensitive to the fact that there could be any number of people who may have a motive for wanting to target him for a crime such as this. However, we also remain open-minded to all of the other possibilities as well, because we don't want to follow one particular trail and find ourselves perhaps missing something along the way. But we are aware of that information specifically, and we're looking into all aspects of this case at this time. Yes, sir.
Can you rule out at this point that this is just a random shooting?
We can't rule out at this point that this is a random shooting. Again, for us at this stage of the investigation, still relatively early when it comes to a shooting investigation of this kind. We aren't ruling anything out. All options are on the table at this point. Yes, ma'am.
Was there anyone home at the time of the shooting, and who made the 911 call?
There was a family member who was home at the time of the shooting. It was that family member who placed that 911 call. We are not releasing which family member that was who was home and placed that call.
Does the residents have a intercom system? I know a lot of these neighbors do. Can you tell us whether they do or not?
I'm not familiar if they do or not. I apologize. Andy?
Yeah, I wanted to know, is his personal property information safeguarded in any way? It's not published anywhere?
Andy, I'm not sure if you're probably speaking to different various databases and web pages where you could find someone's local address. I'm not sure if it's protected information or not. Obviously, there's means for folks to be able to have that information protected, but I'm not sure if those steps had been taken in this particular case. I'll take one more question in the middle in the back.
Mr. Clements received any threats prior to
Tell
the
us if you
shooting?
believe that this was a professional hit, a silencer was used, did anybody hear gunshots?
I can't speak to any details as far as what kind of weapon might have been used or any kind of apparatus that might have been involved with that. There are some reports from some of our canvassing efforts that were done in terms of speaking with neighbors, etc., of possibly hearing some noises that might have been consistent with gunfire, although it's difficult at times to match time frames up on that, but we do have some initial reports indicating some of that. Just last question.
Had there been any threats received by Mr. Clements prior to this?
Unknown if there are any specific threats. Just be mindful, folks, that we're certainly open the line of communications with the Department of Corrections upon the onset of this investigation. Those lines of communication will remain open. We had representatives from their office in the meeting that I spoke about earlier today, and certainly we're covering all of that possible information that come in regarding threats. That's the last question that I'll take regarding the case at this time. I want to let folks know we will not have any live press conference that's scheduled at this point. What I'd like to do as we move forward is if we have information that becomes available that's important to get out, or some kind of break in the case, things of that nature, we will use our Twitter feed to do some of that, as well as putting out press releases through our normal distribution list. For those who are concerned about not being on that distribution list, anytime we have a press release that goes out, we also send a Twitter announcing that particular release and a link straight over to the release as well. So I'd ask for folks to follow that. And again, as we receive updates in this case, I will certainly make those available to you through the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. Thank you very much.
Oh, I got one back.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right, so you were listening to a live press conference on the shooting Clements. It's just a tragic story that's been going on, and Lieutenant Kramer has been speaking to this subject. And he reiterated the things we had just talked about before the press conference. They're continuing on this manhunt. They're looking for an 80s, 90s Lincoln Cadillac, two-door, shiny, black in color. Also, we had the tip line up for folks. So if you do know anything about this, they're also looking for that white female that you actually mentioned a little bit earlier as well.
Yeah, I'm sure they're eager to get their hands on her just to ask her any information that she may have being in that area. That tip line, that number is 719-390-5555. That's the non-emergency number, so make sure you're not calling 911 to report any information on that. But that is the non-emergency number. It is staffed 24/7. So if you have any information at all, of course they don't have a license plate on that vehicle of interest, but certainly looking for that car at this hour as the manhunt continues there.
Well, and as this story continues to develop, we are actually learning a lot more about exactly who Tom Clements was.
That's right. The 58-year-old was appointed head of the Colorado's Department of Corrections in 2011 by Governor John Hickenlooper. And as you could tell, he was very emotional during that press conference this morning. Definitely has a close tie to